Welcome back to Chasers, the show I've been doing about some of the collectibles that I've built up over the years. So far here in season 1, we're talking about mostly the Marvel series trading cards that came out in 1990 whatever, 1990 something. And at this point we're in 1992, still just 2 years from the beginning of this whole, which, okay, isn't entirely true. There have been Marvel trading cards for quite a while. I think the first set we talked about came around by Don Russ at some point in the 60s, and there might have been some before that. But with this most recent iteration where Tom Brevoort and Bob Budiansky decided to do something a little bit more special than had been done in the past with the help of Impel and others at that company, and released Marvel Series 1, Marvel Series 2, and now we're on, like I said, to 1992, where Marvel Series 3 is going to come out. But if you've ever heard this particular period in comic books referred to as the bubble, it's because bubbles are biggest before they burst. And in 92, we had Image Comics exploding onto the scene, DC was killing Superman, and Marvel was not going to let up on the card market. And this time, I remember exactly where I got them from. We're in Lompoc, California again. It's not this empty retail space this time, but right next door is a check into cash, a sad place to make a bad investment. There used to be a happy place to make a bad investment called JD's Sporting Goods. I lived about 4 suburban blocks that way, and I must have been getting enough of an allowance at the time that I used to make the trip probably multiple times in a week to buy pack after pack of Marvel Universe Series 3. In fact, I remember I showed up often enough that the owner at one point asked me what books I was into, and sure enough, those were the titles that started showing up on the shelves not too long after. So good businessman. But I finally had that experience of collecting an entire set, pack by pack. Just my luck, they upped it to 200 cards this time around. So in this particular 90s binder, probably a little harder on the eyes than the other ones, but at least I labeled it. You're going to see a few things right off the bat, I think. And one of the most noticeable things about Marvel Universe Series 3, I think, is the way in which computers came a little bit earlier to the cards than it did to comic books. And even in the early 90s, computers were being used to color comic books to some extent already. But you can tell just by looking at these cards that they look very kind of designed on a computer. Not that I'm saying that in a bad way necessarily, but Marvel Universe Series 3 gets some guff for being maybe a little more sterile than Series 1 or Series 2. Who thought about that back then? You came for the art, right? And I think for the most part, they stuck with what they had been doing. They would give characters to artists that were on the books at the time. That's why you get Valentino doing Major Victory there, Jarvinen doing Hulk. But also, you get some pretty unexpected one-offs, I think. I don't know why Sam Keith would have been doing Nightcrawler, really, although he might have been doing a Nightcrawler or something somewhere for all I know. But you're going to see a lot of the same names, and you're going to see some new ones. Like Mark Texeira, obviously would be doing Ghost Rider, one of his characters, but also did quite a few other characters that I don't know if he was on at the time. Still some artwork that I can pick out just by looking at it. That's obviously John Romita Jr. doing Punisher there. Mark Silvestri's in here again. You'll see lots of Ron Lim again. But strangely enough, the artist that you will not see in Series 3 is Art Adams, the guy who liked doing Series 1 and Series 2 cards so much, did 30 plus for Series 2 alone. Apparently after Series 2, he went to Budiansky or Brevoort and said, hey, what if I do all of Series 3? And they turned him down, despite what we're going to talk about later. And I don't know if that led to a falling out or what, but I just don't see any of his cards, signatures, or artwork in this set. Looks like another Texeira Warpath. Again, I don't think he had much to do with X-Force, was probably Warpath's team at the time, but that's cool. I mean, that's one of the reasons the artists liked doing the cards, is because they could do characters they didn't normally do, but also because they could do kind of one-offs and very iconic poses and stuff like that. Eric Larson, you can still pick out for a lot of these, or at least I can. I was pretty big on his Spider-Man run. And you will see some more Ron Friends. He did a bunch for Series 1 and 2, I want to say. And since we are up to 200 cards, you're going to see more cards in each category. Those were heroes. Here you're getting team ups instead of, were they called battles, I think, in Series 2. And then before that, it was like rivalries or something like that. But the trend continues. For the backs, I think most, if not all, of kind of the trading card tropes are gone. It seems very much more of a comic book thing now. You know, before they kind of messed with stats and stuff like that. Series 3 doesn't even have stats for the team-ups, which I guess makes sense. But they're a little bit even more streamlined, it seems, from 2 to 3. You can see here for these cards even. They still get the inset, but also it comes with a quote by the character, first appearance, and the description like all the others. But it just seems way more comic book focused than any of the series so far, which makes sense. You know, by the third series, they'd be coming into their own. They've probably had some time to get feedback on the other series at this point. So as far as the backs go, Series 3 might be better than the 2 that came before it, actually. Like I said, Series 3 does get some guff for a few reasons. Yes, I would probably even agree that, you know, 1 or 2 would be preferable, but there are quite a few deep cuts in here, and not just for the time even. Maelstrom, I mean, obviously some of these aren't, but Silvermane, I don't remember. Terex, I remember a little bit. And the rookies are no exception. I feel like I've been making fun of them pretty steadily from set to set. But Slapstick, I have not ever heard of. I don't remember hearing about him back then or since. So you also get some new categories like Cosmic Beings. Origins, I think, is up next, which are more interesting because, again, instead of one character that's kind of set against a very computerized background, you get something that tells more of a story in a single image. You also get some classic costumes. Who doesn't love that? Then teams, which they've had for the past 2 sets. Again, you'll see the artists that were often on those teams, although Tom Morgan, who did the original kind of proof of concept for Series 1, back, I would even say, with maybe more cards in Series 3 than Series 2. Then you'll get some wars. Extinction Agenda, Evolutionary War, Infinity Gauntlet. And then you'll get milestones, Days of Future Past, All Hulks Unite, Dark Phoenix Saga. I think comic book storylines was probably too long of a title for the top of a card, so milestones. So yeah, Series 3 gets some guff, and I can see why, but there are a few things I like about it. I like the deep cuts, and that probably has something to do with the 200 card set at this point. They started having fun with some of the characters they chose. But also, this is the first time that I know of where they started to experiment with kind of that 9-card page layout, or whatever you want to call that, where they obviously figured out that these were being collected on 9-page sheets, and they started to toy with some of the cards meeting up in a more cohesive manner on the page. This gets real interesting real quick in some of the later collections, and this is kind of the first time I can remember them starting to experiment with it. And for some reason, even though I know I collected these pack by pack, I don't have any chase cards. No holograms. There was, I think, 5 again to the set, and I don't have a single one. I thought I had Venom at some point, though, so there's a chance that I did the unthinkable with a trading card and I traded it, but I don't know. So no holograms to speak of for this one. But if Series 3 wasn't received as favorably as Series 1 or Series 2, I'd still say that's largely in retrospect because, as I mentioned, in 1992, business was still booming for anything comic book. And while Impel officially renamed themselves Skybox in April, Marvel saw an opportunity in July to buy one of their competitors, Fleer, for $540 million. So obviously looking to consolidate this very profitable business under one roof. This wouldn't change anything until the last day in 1993 when their contract was up with Impel or Skybox. So for that reason, any cards we talk about today are still going to bear that Impel logo. And I say cards because even though Art Adams got shot down for his one artist to one set idea, when they started to branch out and think about what other collections they could do, they thought about their most popular titles, and X-Men was at the top of the list. So they went to Jim Lee, and he did do an entire set, and they must have just barely caught him. I can't imagine it would have been more than a few months before he was going to leave for Image anyway. So they got him for X-Men Series 1. So in what can only be called the crown jewel of any collection of binders, this Trapper Keeper has all of my X-Men Series 1 cards. And to be honest, I didn't find a whole lot about X-Men Series 1 out there. They are all done by Jim Lee. I was a Jim Lee nut at the time. I didn't collect a ton of Uncanny X-Men for whatever reason. I think I got Bishop's run after the fact, and I got the 300th hologram issue. But I was big on Jim Lee's X-Men book that started about the time I was collecting comics. So I don't know. Jim Lee always seemed more symmetrical in a way, maybe less stylistic. Probably isn't fair. But you know, when you're young, you have favorites. You know, my other favorite was Rob Liefeld, and who can explain that? So. You'll get superheroes, much like the other sets, and then supervillains. And Deadpool, yes, is a supervillain. There you go. You heard it here. And since it's a 100-card set, you're not going to find a whole lot of deep picks. Obviously, they would be sticking to classic X-Men villains, but again, that's a pretty wide range of characters that have also been villains in any number of other books. But yeah, I didn't find a ton about this set. I would still imagine it was one of Arnie Sawyer's. It still looks not quite as computer-like as a design as Series 3. I don't know if X-Men came out before or after Series 3, but given they both came out in the same year, I would say they were probably designed concurrently, so there probably isn't much of a lesson to be learned from that. X-Men is another category you'll get, again, maybe reaching at this point. How do we include more characters that aren't even X-Men? What about X-Men? So does that mean everybody before this was current X-Men? I don't think so. So after that, you're going to get Allies. I mentioned that Series 3 was kind of the first place you saw the 9-page design coming up. X-Men Series 1 took it to the next level and had an entire spread with 9 cards to complete the Danger Room set. Loved it. More on that later. But again, no holograms. I don't know what is going on. I know I collected both of those sets pack by pack. Again, either I was trading them or there was really some shady business going on at JD's Sporting Goods where they were ferreting out those hologram cards separately from the packs they were selling to customers. But Marvel Universe Series 3 and X-Men Series 1 were far from the only sets that Marvel released in 1992. In fact, in the same way they came up with doing an X-Men set by looking at what their most popular franchises were at the time, Spider-Man was another obvious choice. And since Mark Bagley was on Amazing Spider-Man at the time, he did most of the cards in that set. I didn't collect that set, or at least I didn't think I did, but apparently I have 2 cards from it. And one of them is Bagley. But this one is quite obviously Todd McFarlane. So, I don't know. But I didn't collect anything else in 92 except for one other set. Apparently, I only had eyes for Joe Jusko. So, come back next time and we'll talk about some Marvel masterpieces.